The text came through at 3:17 a.m. I'm leaving you and moving to Palm Springs with my 25-year-old boyfriend. I'm taking all our money with me. I stared at my phone in the cramped quarters I shared with Rico and Big Jim, 120 miles southeast of Kuwait City. The screenshot showed our joint account, 102 where 142,000 should have been. Sandra had added a kiss emoji. I typed back, "Sure, good luck," and turned off my phone. 27 years of oil rig work, and this was how 18 years of marriage ended. The strange thing was, I felt nothing. Not rage, not heartbreak, just recognition that winter had finally arrived. My grandfather always said winter comes whether you're ready or not. The question is whether you prepared for it. I'd been preparing for 8 years. If you're drawn to stories about men who refuse to be victims, and the calculated moves that save them from financial destruction, like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. Every day brings completely new stories, each one more gripping than the last. It started with my buddy Tommy Hernandez. We were drinking whiskey in his kitchen after his divorce, and he was crying like a baby. 23 years of marriage, and his wife had cleaned him out. House, savings, retirement, gone. She'd been planning it for 2 years with some yoga instructor half her age. I worked my ass off for 23 years, Tommy said. Dangerous work, time away from home, also she could have a nice life. And this is how she repays me. The divorce papers were sitting on his table. His wife was asking for alimony on top of taking everything. Tommy would be working until he died just to pay her bills. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sandra, how she'd been different lately. Distant, always busy with projects I never got to see. New friends I never got to meet. 3 months later, I drove to Houston to see my cousin Preston, an accountant who understood the difference between hiding money and protecting it. We spent hours in his kitchen going through tax law until my head hurt. "We're not hiding money," Caleb, Preston said. "We're protecting it." There's a difference. Winter Holdings LLC was born that night. My grandmother's maiden name attached to a legal corporate structure. Every month for 8 years, 70% of my net pay went into Winter Holdings. The discipline was brutal, especially when Sandra wanted things other oil families had. Vacations to Italy, new cars, kitchen remodels. "We're saving for retirement, honey," I'd tell her. Not exactly a lie. By the time Sandra sent that text, Winter Holdings contained $1.6 million she never knew existed. The signs had been there for years, but I hadn't wanted to see them. Year 12, she stopped asking when I'd be home from rotations. Year 13 brought the expensive gym membership and new friends I never met. Year 15, the girls' night started, coming home at 2 a.m., smelling like cigarettes and unfamiliar perfume. Last Christmas, I came home to find she'd redecorated our entire house without mentioning it. $32,000 on furniture while I was living in a bunk bed with 2 other guys. That night, I couldn't sleep in the strange new bed because I was starting to understand that Sandra hadn't just redecorated the house. She'd erased me from it. 2 months before that text, I noticed transfers from our joint account. Small amounts, $500, $800. Foundation work, Sandra said when I asked. But when I drove by the house before my last rotation, there was no construction equipment. Just a black Mercedes parked in my driveway like it belonged there. I sat across the street for 20 minutes, waiting to see who'd come out. Nobody did. I was due at the helicopter pad in 2 hours. Easier to tell myself there was some innocent explanation than face whatever truth was waiting inside. "Your wife okay?" Rico asked the morning after Sandra's text. "You were awake most of the night." "Marriage stuff," I said. "Nothing I can fix from out here." Rico had been divorced twice. He understood the particular helplessness of relationship problems when you're 6,000 miles from home. "You need to call in early rotation?" "No, I'll finish." What I didn't tell him was that finishing wouldn't matter. Whatever was happening at home had been happening for months. While Sandra was orchestrating my destruction from thousands of miles away, she was living in a different reality. 3 weeks before sending that text, she'd been sitting outside Wells Fargo, working up courage for another transfer. She and Austin needed $40,000 more for their house in Palm Springs, and the only way to get it was draining my accounts before I finished rotation. Austin Fletcher was 25, a personal trainer who made Sandra feel alive for the first time in years. Where I was tired and distracted when I came home, Austin made her feel like the center of his world. Where I sent money home like that solved everything, Austin chose to be with her. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Austin told her over coffee. "I found the perfect place in Palm Springs, but we need to move fast." Sandra had been taking money gradually for months, but suddenly rushing felt dangerous. "What about Caleb's other accounts?" "I know he's hiding money somewhere. We'll figure it out after we're established in California," Austin said. "Community property laws will get you half of whatever he's been hiding." That night, Sandra changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. $750,000. She had to forge my signature. Smart thinking, Austin said when she told him. How much? $750,000. But I had to forge his signature. If anyone investigates, nobody's going to investigate. Caleb works one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. If something happened, it would be completely believable. Sandra pulled her hand back. I don't want anything to happen to him. I just want to start over. Of course not, but if it did happen naturally, we'd be financially secure forever. Sometimes life solves problems for us. 2 weeks later, Sandra made the final transfer, every dollar except 2 cents to keep the account active. Then she sent the text that ended our marriage. When Austin came out of the shower, Sandra was staring at her phone. Did you send it? Yes, what did he say? When my response finally came, sure, good luck, Austin laughed. That's it? 20 years of marriage and that's all he has to say? Sandra felt something like disappointment. Part of her had expected me to fight for our marriage. My casual acceptance somehow made it worse. The reckoning came fast once I returned to Texas. Preston met me at Bush Intercontinental with a burner phone and evidence that made my blood run cold. Sandra had been calling my regular number non-stop since yesterday, full panic mode. The bank had frozen the account she'd transferred money to, standard procedure for large, unusual movements. But there was worse news waiting. Preston had accessed Sandra's iCloud backup. She'd set up her new phone using my Apple ID and never changed the password. The messages between her and Austin told the complete story. Sandra, bank froze the money. Need Caleb to verify in person. Austin, he's still on the rig for 10 more days. Tell him there's an emergency. Sandra, he's not answering my calls. Austin, try harder. We need that money before the house closing or we look at Plan B. Sandra, I'm not comfortable with Plan B. Austin, it's just insurance money. He works a dangerous job for a reason. Accidents happen all the time on those rigs. I read that exchange 3 times before the words registered. Plan B wasn't idle talk. Austin's history showed he'd done this before. There was a guy in Beaumont whose death had netted Austin's previous girlfriend $750,000 in insurance money. My lawyer, Mitchell Cross, had already prepared divorce papers and criminal complaints. But Sandra had filed first, a domestic violence claim saying she'd left because of ongoing abuse and financial control. It's a tactic, Mitchell explained. Gains sympathy with the judge and justifies taking the money. The hearing was set for the next day. I drove to Odessa that night, staying at a Holiday Inn because I legally couldn't approach my own house. My neighbor Frank met me at Denny's at 11 p.m. He'd been watching everything unfold from across the street, different cars in my driveway, Austin wearing my clothes while mowing my lawn, Sandra leaving in his Mercedes. Why didn't you call me? I asked. Some things a man has to figure out for himself, Frank said. But I took pictures. Figured you might need evidence eventually. The next morning, I watched from Frank's kitchen as deputies served papers to Sandra and Austin. The look on Sandra's face when she saw me across the street was shock giving way to fear. Austin's reaction was different. His eyes immediately scanned for exits. You can't do this, Austin said when I crossed the street. She's afraid of you. We have a domestic violence claim. Had, I corrected. Judge Patterson dismissed it an hour ago. Hard to abuse someone from 6,000 miles away. She was particularly interested in your text messages discussing Plan B and my insurance policy. That's when Sandra broke. Not into tears, into pure fury. You bastard, she screamed. I gave you the best years of my life. 18 years waiting for you to come home. I deserved that money. The money you earned? I asked quietly. I earned it by staying here. By being alone. By pretending to be happy when you called. But what Sandra didn't know was about to change everything. Keep watching to see how one man's 8-year preparation turns the tables completely. Neighbors were coming out to watch now. You think you're so smart with your secret accounts? I've been looking for your hidden money for 2 years. Why do you think I had to take everything I could get my hands on? You were planning to leave me with nothing. The deputies handed over the paperwork, restraining order, asset freezing, criminal complaints, divorce proceedings. Austin would disappear 2 days later, taking Sandra's remaining cash and jewelry with him. As they headed inside under supervision, Sandra turned back one final time. I hope you're happy, Caleb. You got your money, but you lost everything else. You're going to die alone. Maybe, I said, but I'll die free. The divorce hearing took place 3 weeks later. Sandra sat with a young public defender. Austin had vanished with her money. She looked like she'd aged 5 years and 3 weeks. Judge Patricia Patterson had been on the bench 30 years and had zero patience for bullshit. When she reached the messages discussing Plan B and insurance money, she stopped reading and looked directly at Sandra. Mrs. Morrison, are you aware of the penalties for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud? It wasn't like that, Your Honor. Austin was just frustrated. He didn't mean anything. A plan to cause your husband's death for insurance money is just frustrated. The ruling was swift. All assets would be returned to me. The house remained my sole property. Sandra's claims for spousal support were denied. Criminal referral to the district attorney. As we left the courtroom, Sandra tried to approach me one last time. "Caleb, please, I know I made mistakes, but we can work this out. I'll pay you back." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. Cheap dress, circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "Sandra," I said quietly, "you spent 18 years lying to me. I'm not sure you even know what truth looks like anymore." The first month after the divorce was finalized, I lived in that Holiday Inn, unable to face returning to the house. Those were dark days. I'd wake at 3 a.m., in that generic room and stare at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. The physical effects were brutal. Food tasted like cardboard. Lost 20 pounds in 2 months. Started having panic attacks in grocery stores, overwhelmed by bright lights and too many choices. My hands would shake when I tried to pour coffee. Sleep came in 2-hour chunks, interrupted by dreams where Sandra was still planning my death. The worst part was the self-doubt that crept in during quiet moments. What if Sandra's accusations had some truth? What if I had been emotionally absent, controlling with money? What if I'd driven her to desperate measures through my own failures as a husband? These thoughts would surface at 3 a.m. when the hotel room felt like a prison cell and sleep wouldn't come. Maybe Sandra was right. Maybe I was the kind of husband who forced his wife to steal and lie and plan his destruction. The rational part of my brain knew this was bullshit. You don't commit fraud and conspiracy to commit murder because your husband works long hours. But the irrational part, the part that had been systematically destroyed by 18 years of lies, wasn't so sure. For 3 months, I didn't choose anything. Just existed in that hotel room, watching cable TV and eating room service, trying to figure out who I was when nobody needed anything from me. I'd order the same meal every day, club sandwich and fries, because making decisions felt overwhelming. The housekeeping staff started leaving extra towels without being asked, probably figuring I was going through something heavy. I stopped shaving. Stopped returning calls from Rico and Big Jim, who'd finished their rotation and were checking on me. Stopped opening mail that piled up by the door. The outside world felt too complicated, too full of people who might want explanations I didn't have energy to give. Some days I'd drive to the house and sit across the street, staring at the windows like they might reveal some truth I'd missed. The new furniture was still visible through the living room window, Sandra's modern minimalist stuff that looked like it belonged in a doctor's office. I'd wonder if she'd been planning my erasure even while picking out that furniture, calculating how to make me feel like a stranger in my own home. Preston finally came to visit during month 2. Found me watching a fishing show at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, wearing the same clothes for 3 days. The room smelled stale and there were takeout containers stacked on every surface. "This is concerning," he said, sitting in the room's only chair. "You won, Caleb. You protected yourself, got justice, came out ahead financially. So why do you look like a man who lost everything?" I didn't have a good answer. How do you explain that victory feels hollow when it comes at the cost of believing in nothing? "Maybe the problem isn't that you missed the signs," Preston continued. "Maybe the problem is that you're a decent person who assumed the woman you married was also decent. Maybe that's not stupidity, maybe that's just being human." He was quiet for a minute, watching me process that. "You know what the real victory is?" he asked. "Not the money you saved or the house you kept. It's that you're still you. Sandra tried to destroy your ability to trust, to love, to believe in good things. She wanted to turn you into someone bitter and suspicious who'd never risk caring about anyone again. Don't let her win that part." 3 days after Preston's visit, I finally drove to the house. My house. It looked smaller somehow, and there were packages on the front porch that Frank hadn't gotten to yet. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes trying to decide if it felt like home or a crime scene. Both, I guess. The key still worked. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it the day I'd served Sandra with papers. Her modern furniture, her color scheme, her attempt to erase our history together. But walking through those rooms, I realized something had changed. It wasn't my history she'd erased, it was hers. Every piece of furniture, every paint color, every design choice screamed that she'd never really lived here. She'd just been staging a set while planning her exit. I spent the afternoon going through closets and drawers looking for anything that felt real. Found a box of photos she'd left behind, pictures from our early years when her smile looked genuine. There we were at Rico's wedding, Sandra laughing at something Big Jim had said. Another of us camping in Colorado, both of us sunburned and happy after hiking all day. A dozen more from Christmas mornings, birthday parties, ordinary moments that had felt significant at the time. Looking at those photos, I could almost remember what it felt like to trust someone completely. To assume the person sharing your bed and your life was fundamentally on your side. The woman in those pictures might have been real once, before whatever combination of loneliness and resentment and Austin's manipulation had turned her into someone capable of planning murder. But she was gone now, if she'd ever really existed. And mourning her felt like mourning a ghost. 6 months later, I made a decision that changed everything. I could stay in Odessa, haunted by memories, or I could go somewhere new and start building the life I actually wanted. I'd always liked Montana, visited a few times on hunting trips with guys from the rig, fell in love with the wide spaces and mountains that went on forever. Winter Holdings had purchased 40 acres of pine forest outside Missoula 5 years earlier, a retirement investment Sandra never knew about. I'd sometimes lie awake on the platform dreaming about building a cabin there someday, imagining what it would feel like to wake up somewhere I could see the horizon without oil derricks interrupting the view. The sale of the Odessa house went through in September. I kept Frank's number. Good people are worth staying in touch with. But everything else from my old life got donated, sold, or thrown away. 18 years of marriage reduced to what could fit in a pickup truck and a small U-Haul trailer. The drive to Montana took 12 hours. I stopped in Denver for the night, ate truck stop food, called Preston to report my progress. "You nervous?" he asked. "About what?" "Starting over. New place, new life, nobody you know." I thought about it. No, for the first time in years, I'm not nervous about anything. The property was even better than I'd remembered. 40 acres of rolling meadow and pine forest, with a creek running through the south corner and a view of the Bitterroot Mountains that made you understand why people write songs about the American West. The existing cabin was small but well built. 2 bedrooms, solid construction, everything a man living alone would need. I spent October just cleaning and organizing, figuring out what needed fixing and what could wait. The silence was profound. No rig noise, no roommates, no phone calls from people who wanted something. Just wind in the trees and the occasional owl calling across the meadow. I started sleeping better than I had in years. 8 solid hours without dreams about platform accidents or insurance policies or women planning my destruction. But the loneliness hit hard when the first snow came in November. I woke up one morning to 6 inches of fresh powder and realized I hadn't had a real conversation with another human being in 4 days. The silence that had felt peaceful in October started feeling oppressive by December. I'd find myself talking to the radio, responding to news anchors like they could hear me. That's when I wandered into a used bookstore in downtown Missoula and met Rebecca Chen. The place was called Second Chapter Books, a name that should have been cheesy but somehow felt right. Rebecca wasn't trying to fix my broken heart or rescue me from anything. She was just working the register, helping an elderly man find a book about World War II his grandson had recommended. I bought 3 books without much conversation and left. Tom Clancy, Louis L'Amour, something about fly fishing in Montana. But I kept going back, maybe once a week, sometimes buying books, sometimes just browsing. The place felt calm in a way most businesses didn't. No loud music, no sales pressure, just quiet people looking for stories. Rebecca owned the place, had bought it after her own divorce from a Seattle lawyer who decided he wanted someone younger and less independent. She was 49, with graying hair. She didn't try to hide and laugh lines around her eyes that suggested she'd learned to find things funny again after they stopped being painful. "I moved here from Seattle after my divorce," she told me one evening when the store was empty and we'd been talking about books for 20 minutes. "Sometimes you need to get far enough away to remember who you are." That was exactly right. In Seattle, she'd been Tom Chen's wife, the attorney's spouse who organized dinner parties and looked good at firm functions. In Missoula, she was just Rebecca, the woman who recommended books and made excellent coffee and knew the difference between solitude and loneliness. We started having dinner together once or twice a week. Nothing formal. She'd stop by after closing the bookstore. I'd grill something simple. We'd sit on my deck and watch sunsets behind the mountains. Easy companionship between 2 people who'd both learned hard lessons about trust and weren't in any hurry to repeat past mistakes. "Are we dating?" Rebecca asked one evening in April as we watched a spectacular sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. "I think so. Are we?" "I think so too. I'm just not sure what that means at our age." "What do you want it to mean?" I asked. "I want it to mean we're figuring it out as we go. No pressure, no timelines, no assumptions about where we're headed. Just 2 adults who enjoy each other's company and see what develops." That sounded perfect. But even as I was agreeing, part of my brain was screaming warnings. This is how it starts. This is how they get you to trust them. The paranoia followed me to Montana. When Rebecca mentioned using some of my consulting income to expand her bookstore, just a casual comment about adding a coffee shop section, every alarm bell in my head started ringing. "I'm not ready for that," I said, probably sharper than I intended. "Ready for what? Investing in a business? Ready for joint anything? Shared finances? Combined assets?" The conversation went downhill from there. Rebecca left early and I spent the night second-guessing everything. Was she being practical, or was this Sandra all over again? How do you tell the difference between someone who wants to build something with you and someone who wants to take something from you? The tension lasted weeks until Rebecca's ex-husband tried to contact her. He wanted to meet for coffee, said he had something important to tell her. "What does your gut tell you?" I asked. My gut says he's realized divorcing me was a mistake. But I wonder if I'm being too cynical. If my divorce broke something in me that makes me suspicious of everyone. "You think Sandra broke something in me?" I asked. "I think Sandra taught you that trust is dangerous." "But I'm not Sandra, Caleb. I don't want your money. I don't want to control your life. I just want to build something real with someone I care about. But I can't do that with someone who's constantly waiting for me to betray him." We talked for hours that night about damage and fear and whether it was possible to love someone without completely trusting them. About the difference between being careful and being paranoid. About how to move forward when your past keeps telling you that caring about someone gives them power to destroy you. 2 years later, we planned a simple ceremony in October when the aspen trees were gold. 20 people, simple vows, simple promises to keep choosing each other, despite the damage we'd both carried into the relationship. The wedding was everything Sandra's would have been if we'd renewed our vows. Small, genuine, focused on what mattered instead of what looked good. My brother flew in from Dallas, Rebecca's sister came from Portland, and Rico and Big Jim made the drive from Texas with their wives. Frank Kowalski, who'd become something like a father figure after watching my back during the divorce, walked Rebecca down the aisle when her own father couldn't travel. "I choose you," I said, looking at Rebecca with mountains behind her and autumn light filtering through golden leaves, "not because I need you, but because I want you. Because you've shown me the difference between loving someone and trusting someone, and you've earned both." "I choose you," she replied, "because you've taught me that starting over doesn't mean starting from scratch. It means building something better with the wisdom we've earned." The reception was barbecue on my deck, country music from a portable speaker, and stories that got funnier as the evening wore on. Rico told embarrassing stories about my early days on the platform. Big Jim's wife showed photos of their grandkids. Rebecca's customers from the bookstore brought wedding gifts wrapped in pages from old novels, a tradition that made both of us laugh. As the party wound down and guests headed back to their hotels, Rebecca and I sat on the deck steps sharing a beer and watching stars emerge over the mountains. "No regrets?" she asked. "None," I said. "You?" "Just one." She was quiet for a moment. "I wish it hadn't taken us so long to find each other. Think of all the good years we lost to other people's problems." I understood what she meant, but I wasn't sure I agreed. Maybe we needed those years. Maybe we wouldn't have been ready for this if we'd met when we were still married to other people. "You think Sandra and Tom made us better partners?" "I think they taught us what we wouldn't accept. What we'd fight for and what we'd walk away from. That's worth something." Rebecca nodded, leaning against my shoulder as an owl called across the meadow. "Winter Holdings," she said quietly. "What about it? That's what you built, right?" "Protection against winter. But what you actually built was a foundation for spring." She was right. The money had mattered, but not in the way I'd expected. It hadn't just protected me from Sandra's betrayal. It had given me the freedom to choose something better when the time came. The freedom to walk away from everything familiar and start over somewhere I could be myself without apologizing for it. Last month, I got a text from Austin's sister that brought the story full circle. "Mr. Morrison, I know you don't want to hear from our family, but I wanted to thank you. When Austin got arrested in Arizona, your testimony helped convict him on multiple fraud charges. Some good came from your courage to speak up. Austin's in prison now, serving 8 years for a pattern of financial fraud across multiple states. The investigation uncovered enough evidence in Lisa Thompson's husband's death, his previous victim, to reopen that case, though criminal charges remain unlikely due to time and jurisdiction issues. According to Preston's occasional updates, Sandra married a mechanic from Tulsa named Dave, who seems like decent people. I hope it works out for her. Everyone deserves a second chance, even people who've made terrible choices. She's working as a hotel desk clerk and attending church regularly. Maybe she found some peace. The mechanic doesn't know about Austin or the insurance fraud or any of it. That's Sandra's choice to make, whether to start clean or carry that history into her new marriage. Part of me wants to warn him, but a larger part recognizes that's not my story to tell anymore. I'm 55 now, Rebecca's 51. We run the expanded bookstore cafe together, and I take consulting jobs when they interest me, rather than when I need the money. We travel when we feel like it. Last fall, we spent 3 weeks driving through New Mexico, stopping at bookstores and art galleries and sleeping in small-town hotels that reminded us why we'd fallen in love with the American West. This summer, we're considering Scotland. Rebecca has distant family there, and we've both read enough books about the Highlands to be curious whether the reality matches the romance. Plans made from choice, not desperation or obligation. The difference matters more than I would have understood 5 years ago. I still think about Sandra sometimes. Not with hate, but with a kind of confused sadness. There are moments when I catch myself missing her. Not the woman she actually was, but the woman I thought she was. The woman who made pancakes on Sunday mornings during my home rotation and laughed at bad movies and curled up against me during thunderstorms. That woman never existed, but I miss her anyway. She was the story I told myself about my marriage, the narrative that made 18 years of loneliness and hard work and financial sacrifice feel worthwhile. Losing her was like losing a character from a book I'd been writing for 2 decades. Fictional, but real in all the ways that mattered to me. Winter Holdings wasn't just money in an account, it was dignity in a vault, self-respect in a corporate structure, the foundation that let me recognize the difference between someone who needed me and someone who chose me. More than that, it gave me the right to say no when everyone else was saying I should say yes. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a man is discovering his worst nightmare wasn't actually the end of the world. Sometimes losing everything helps you figure out what really matters. Winter always comes, whether you're ready or not. The question isn't whether you'll survive it, it's whether you'll still be yourself when spring finally arrives. I was ready, I stayed myself. And for the first time in my adult life, that feels like enough. If you enjoyed this story of survival, preparation, and finding love again after betrayal, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Every story here is about real people facing impossible situations and finding ways to come out stronger. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.